I know the risks. I know the realities. And I'm still choosing you. "75%. That's how many marriages are on life support or already dead. Yet millions of men still sign a contract they've never read. A gold band spins on a marble table. Casino chips marked savings. Time. Kids slide to the center. A judge's gavel drops like a roulette ball. The wheel keeps turning. You've seen it. Men in their 30s, 40s, even 50s, stepping off the altar and into a deal where the house always wins. Not because they can't find love, not because they're broken, because the math is brutal. When you count the couples staying for the kids, the mortgage, or the health insurance. 3 out of 4 marriages are either dead or dying. You wouldn't bet your house on those odds. But every year, men bet their entire future on a wedding they mistake for a win. They watch the wreckage in real time, friends shredded in family court, fathers priced out of their kids' lives, paychecks chained to houses they no longer live in. They see the wheel, and they're choosing not to spin it. Here's the twist. No one says out loud, 86% of the people who lose go right back to the table within 5 years. They eat the financial hit, crawl through emotional hell, watch a family split, and then whisper the gambler's prayer, "This time will be different." It won't. Because this isn't a fairy tale. It's a contract. And once you look at it like a contract, you finally see the odds for what they are and why more men are walking away from the table. So let's do what nobody does on their wedding day. Read the fine print and ask why this is the worst deal a man can sign. Imagine this. You're at a casino. The dealer looks you in the eye and says, "This game has a 75% failure rate. 3 out of 4 players lose everything." Would you push your life savings onto that table? Of course not. Yet every single day, men walk into courtrooms and churches to sign a marriage contract with odds that bad. Here's the problem. Marriage is not what people think it is. It's not just flowers, music, or a tearful promise of forever. Strip all that away, and you're left with a legal agreement between you, another person, and the state, and the fine print. It's brutal. You are essentially betting half of your assets, half of your future income, and often half of your time with your kids, on the fragile hope that feelings will never change. Not just your feelings, hers too. But feelings always change. People evolve. People drift. People fall out of love. And when that happens, the contract doesn't dissolve quietly. It enforces itself. It takes, and takes, and keeps taking. Courts don't care that you grew apart. They don't care that you tried. They don't care that you're still a good father. All they see is a ledger. All they want is compliance. This is why so many men describe divorce as financial death. Because it doesn't just cost money. It costs years of life, peace of mind, and in many cases, their bond with their children. The system doesn't see a father, it sees a paycheck. And once you've been through that machine, you never walk out the same. The saddest part, that most men didn't go in blind because they hated women or feared love. They went in blind because society told them this was the path to respect. Movies ended with a wedding. Parents kept asking, "When's your turn?" Friends posted pictures like they'd won the Olympics. The pressure was constant. Marriage was marketed as success. Bachelorhood was framed as failure. But now, men are waking up. They're looking at marriage not through the rose-colored lens of romance, but through the black and white logic of contract law. And when you read it like a contract, the truth is unavoidable. No sane person would sign this deal. Not when the odds are this bad. Not when the risks are this high. So here's the uncomfortable punchline: marriage isn't a fairy tale. It's a bet with your life in the chamber. And for the first time, men are putting down the pen, refusing to sign, and walking away from the table. And once you see marriage as a contract, you can't ignore the part that really drives it: money. Because behind every I do is an exchange of value, and pretending otherwise is how men get played. If you really want to understand why men are stepping back, you have to stop pretending marriage is built only on love. Every relationship, every single one, is an exchange of value. That doesn't mean love isn't real. It means love has always been tied to resources. And the sooner you admit that, the clearer everything becomes. Look back through history. For thousands of years, marriage wasn't about passion. It was about survival, alliances, family wealth, and stability. The idea of marrying purely for love, that's barely 100 years old. Yet today, society sells us the fantasy that love floats above money, that it exists in some magical bubble. But money is there in every decision, whether people admit it or not. Take the stereotype everyone whispers about the older wealthy man with the younger beautiful woman. People sneer and call her a gold digger. But let's be honest, he brings resources, stability, and status. She brings youth, beauty, and energy. Both sides know what they're trading. In many ways, that arrangement has more honesty than the so-called pure love marriages, where couples pretend money doesn't matter while secretly keeping score every step of the way. Here's the real danger. It's not the exchange itself, it's the delusion. The older man who convinces himself she loves him for his personality. The husband who tells himself money isn't part of the equation. The guy who buys into the performance instead of recognizing the transaction. At least in prostitution, you know exactly what you're paying for and what you're getting. But marriage disguises an economic exchange as eternal romance. That's how men get blindsided. And women, they understand this game better. They're not villains for considering money. They're rational. They know feelings fade, but bills never do. They know kids need food, healthcare, and education. They know love doesn't pay for emergencies. They know what men are only now starting to realize: marriage is an economic contract, dressed up in flowers and white dresses. And this is why successful men with assets, men who've built something, see marriage as Russian roulette. Because the more you've earned, the more the contract can take from you when it blows up. For men with nothing, marriage might feel like an opportunity. But for men with something to lose, it looks like a trap. So let's strip away the illusions. Marriage isn't broken because people don't care about love anymore. It's broken because we keep pretending it isn't about money. And pretending money doesn't matter. That's how you end up broke, bitter, and blind. And this is where the word everyone hates comes in, the one that kills the fantasy but could save your future prenup. Say the word prenup and watch how fast people panic. They'll roll their eyes. They'll say it's cold, unromantic, even offensive. They'll accuse you of planning for failure before the marriage even begins. But here's the truth. Asking for a prenup isn't expecting divorce. It's admitting reality. Marriage isn't one thing. It's three: spiritual, social, and legal. The spiritual side is between you and your faith. The social side is the party, the cake, the dress, the celebration. But the legal side, that's the contract with the state. And it's the part almost nobody thinks about on their wedding day. Picture this. A groom stands at the altar in a rented tux, smiling at the bride, thinking about honeymoon sex. Meanwhile, He's signing a document that gives the government control over his financial future. And here's the kicker, the rules can change at any time. Tax laws, custody laws, alimony laws. The contract you signed in 2010 isn't the same contract binding you in 2024. The state rewrites the rules mid-game, and you've already agreed to play. That's why a prenup matters. It's not saying, I don't trust you. It's saying, I don't trust the system. It's about taking control of your future instead of handing it to judges and lawyers who don't care about you, don't know you, and definitely don't love you. And the model is simple. Yours, mine, ours. What you bring in stays yours. What I bring in stays mine. What we build together. We share. Clean, fair, equal. Yet most people still resist. Why? Because the fantasy feels better than the truth. Because writing your own rules feels less romantic than pretending love conquers all. But let's be honest. A prenup isn't planning for failure. It's insurance. You don't buy life insurance because you expect to die tomorrow. You don't wear a seatbelt because you know you'll crash today. You don't save money because you plan to lose your job next month. You do those things because risk exists. And marriage with a 75% failure rate, it's the riskiest bet you'll ever make. So the real question isn't whether a prenup kills romance. The real question is why protecting yourself financially is treated like betrayal. Because if you think about it, what's more romantic than saying, I love you enough to make sure we're both safe, even if this ends? And here's the twist nobody expects. A prenup doesn't weaken love. It strengthens it. Because when you're free to leave but choose to stay, that's when commitment becomes real. Here's the twist almost no one sees coming. A prenup doesn't poison romance. In many cases, it actually makes it stronger. Because real romance isn't blind trust, it's conscious choice. It's two people saying, I know the risks, I know the realities, and I'm still choosing you. Think about it. When both partners know they're protected, the relationship shifts. You don't stay because you're trapped. You don't stay because leaving would mean financial ruin. You stay because you want to. That's more romantic than any fairy tale, knowing someone could walk away at any time. But that's love. That's commitment. A good prenup doesn't just protect money. It protects dignity. It says, if this ends, we both walk away whole. It says, I respect you enough to protect you even from me. It says, we enter this as equals. And if we ever leave, we leave as equals too. That's not planning for failure. That's building a foundation sturdy enough to survive reality. The problem is, most people are addicted to the performance of romance. They'll spend months planning the wedding, picking flowers, colors, playlists, but won't spend a single hour planning for what happens after the party ends. They'll sign a state contract without reading a single line. They'll call that love. But in truth, it's fantasy. And that's why so many men end up stuck. They marry with blind faith. Years later, when the spark fades, they're not just heartbroken, they're trapped. Divorce becomes financial suicide. Walking away means losing kids, homes, retirement savings. So they stay, not because they love, but because they can't afford to leave. You've seen these men, the guy who stays late at the office every night, not because he loves his job, but because home feels like a prison. The man who drinks too much, not from joy, but from numbness. The husband on antidepressants, not because of biology, but because he's chained to a dead marriage. They're not in the divorce statistics, but they're casualties all the same. And here's the bitter irony. Society looks at these men and calls them successful, commendable, dutiful. But the truth is, They're not partners anymore. They're inmates. And society applauds their misery as proof of commitment. That's why prenups matter. Because they keep love voluntary. They ensure that if you stay, it's because you choose to, not because you're locked inside a contract you can't escape. And that choice, repeated every single day, is the only kind of love that actually lasts. But this leads us to the brutal question men can't ignore if the costs are this high. What exactly does marriage still offer men in return? Men today are doing the math, and the numbers are merciless. Take your net worth and cut it in half. That's the starting price of divorce. Add legal fees that drain you for years. Add alimony that locks you into decades of payments. Add child support. Add therapy bills. Add the stress, the lost productivity, the quiet devastation of losing access to your kids half the time. That's not just financial loss. That's life loss. So here's the obvious question. What do men actually get in return? What does marriage offer that justifies this gamble? Once upon a time, the answer was clear. Marriage gave men status. It opened career doors. It provided social approval. It gave them children society called legitimate. It promised companionship, intimacy, and domestic support. But look around today. One by one, those benefits have been dismantled. Society doesn't shame bachelors anymore. In fact, many single men are celebrated for their independence. Career discrimination against unmarried men, illegal. Sex more accessible outside marriage than inside it for most men. Domestic support, nearly gone. Most households now run on 2 incomes, and both partners are too exhausted to provide the kind of support marriage once implied. So what's left? Love. You don't need a legal contract for that. Commitment. You can commit without a judge watching. Partnership. You can build that without tying yourself to state paperwork. The only unique benefit marriage offers today is the opportunity to lose half your assets and risk losing your children if it fails. That's not a benefit. That's a loaded gun pointed at your future. And yet, when men voice this, they get shamed. People call them bitter, broken, damaged. But here's the reality. Many of the men walking away from marriage have never been divorced. Some have never been married once. They're not bitter. They're thriving. They're not damaged. They're informed. They've seen the wreckage. They've read the contract, and they've chosen not to sign. That isn't weakness. That's clarity. This is the uncomfortable truth people don't want to face. Men aren't rejecting marriage because they can't love. They're rejecting it because they can love without putting their financial future, their freedom, and their relationship with their children on the line. They're not commitment phobic. They're risk aware. They're not boys refusing to grow up. They're adults who refuse to play a rigged game. And once you see the costs stacked against the shrinking benefits, the next question is obvious: who really profits from this system? Because it sure isn't the men signing the contract. Follow the money and you'll see the truth. Divorce isn't just heartbreak, it's business. A billion-dollar industry that feeds on broken families. Lawyers charging hundreds of dollars an hour. Therapists building entire practices off the trauma. Real estate agents cashing in when families are forced to sell their homes. Even the courts themselves rake in fees. An entire machine runs on the misery of men and women tearing each other apart. And men, especially those with resources, are the fuel. Family court isn't broken. It's working exactly the way it was designed. Not to protect families. Not to encourage peace, but to extract resources. The more conflict, the more profit. Quick, clean divorces don't make money. Long, ugly ones do. Every motion filed, every custody evaluation, every extra hearing. Those aren't just steps. their billable hours, their revenue streams, and who bleeds the most men. Not because they're villains, but because they're statistically the higher earners. Courts don't see fathers, they see paychecks. The system doesn't care about your story. It doesn't care how good of a dad you are. It cares about how much you make and how much it can take. Ask yourself this: do you really believe the judge cares about your happiness? Do you think your lawyer and your ex's lawyer aren't golfing buddies outside the courtroom? Do you believe the system wants your divorce settled fast? No, the system wants blood. The system thrives on dragging it out. Every complication means more money. Every argument means another check signed. And the cruelest part, you signed up for it. On your wedding day, when you said, "I do," you didn't just promise love. You handed the state a blank check drawn on your future. If your marriage collapses, they get paid. The worse it collapses, the more they earn. So when men talk about prenups, when they talk about protecting themselves, it isn't paranoia, it's survival. And yet society treats it like betrayal. As if being smart with money somehow means you don't believe in love. But here's the truth. Fantasy doesn't pay alimony. Fantasy doesn't win custody battles. Fantasy doesn't rebuild your life after financial ruin. Only reality does. And reality is what more and more men are choosing. They're done being products of a system that profits from their pain. So what does this mean for the future of marriage itself? If men are walking away in record numbers, is this a crisis or is it evolution? This is why marriage is collapsing. Not because men are weak, not because women are broken, but because the contract itself no longer makes sense. It demands too much. It offers too little. For men with assets, careers, or futures to protect. The gamble is insane. For men with nothing, marriage might still feel like a ticket to stability. But for those who've built something, it looks like Russian roulette with their life's work on the line. And here's what society can't accept. The old shame tactics don't work anymore. Call men boys for avoiding marriage. It doesn't sting when those so-called boys are building businesses, traveling the world, and living free while their married friends are stuck in court, drained and defeated. Tell them they're missing out. It doesn't stick when they can see the misery of friends who stayed. Threaten them with dying alone. It doesn't scare them when they've already watched divorced men die alone anyway, just poorer and emptier. The script has flipped. A new model is emerging. Men aren't rejecting love. They're rejecting legal entanglement. They're still dating, still building relationships, still committing. But they're doing it on their terms, keeping their finances separate, maintaining their independence, protecting their freedom while still choosing connection. And here's the twist. Many of them are thriving. For the first time in history, men are free to ask the question nobody dared before. What's in it for me? And when they run the numbers, the answer is clear. The social rewards are gone. The financial risks are worse than ever. The deal is broken. Walking away isn't weakness. It's rational. This isn't celebration. It isn't condemnation. It's observation. The marriage rate keeps dropping. The average age of first marriage keeps rising. More men are choosing singlehood not out of immaturity, but out of clarity. Instead of asking why men are broken, maybe we should be asking why marriage is so broken that rational men want nothing to do with it. And maybe this isn't a crisis at all. Maybe it's evolution. Maybe men are finally realizing that their value doesn't come from signing a bad contract. Maybe masculinity isn't about sacrificing your freedom to a broken system, but about building a life so solid you don't need escape routes. Until marriage changes, until the risks match the rewards, men will keep walking away. Not from love, not from women, but from a game that was rigged against them from the start. And if this message resonates, if it voices what you've been thinking but couldn't say, then it's time to share it. Because the silence is what keeps the system alive. If this message hit you, it's because deep down, you already knew it. You've seen the numbers. You've seen the wreckage. Maybe you've lived it. Maybe you've just watched it happen to friends and fathers. Either way, the truth is the same modern marriage isn't love. It's a contract. And for men, it's the worst contract they'll ever be asked to sign. Walking away from that deal doesn't make you bitter. It doesn't make you broken. It makes you aware. It makes you smart. It makes you free. So here's what I'm asking. Share this with a man who needs to hear it. Someone who's on the edge. Someone who's been told he's afraid of commitment for refusing to play a rigged game. Let him know he's not alone. Like this video, if it opened your eyes. Subscribe if you want more unfiltered truth about love, money, and the contracts that can make or destroy your future. Because here's the bottom line. Love is real. Commitment is real. Partnership is real. But marriage, the way it's structured today, is not love. It's not partnership. It's not forever. It's a gamble where the house always wins. And the smartest thing a man can do is refuse to play.